Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. On behalf of the CMA and CIMA, we thank you for joining us today. I'm Leslie Warshaw with CIMA, and I will be your host for today's webinar. Before we get started, I've got just a little bit of housekeeping to do. First, I just want to point out that as you have any questions, please type them into the chat box. We always like to get questions, so feel free to let us know what your questions are via the chat box, and you should see that on your screen. For today's webinar, we will hold all the questions until the end of the webinar. And we also want to let you know that a recording and a PDF of this webinar will be posted in the resource library for our members to access. Today we have Marc Hubbard from Advantage Group, and Marc is going to talk to us about drivers of engagement, what matters most to suppliers and retailers today and tomorrow. A little bit about Marc's background. Marc has nearly 20 years of international sales and market research experience, having worked on 3 continents with leading international Fortune 100 and Fortune 500 CPG, retail, and technology companies, as well as companies in the supply chain. Before we dive into the presentation, before I turn it over to Marc, I just wanted to also mention to everyone on the webinar here today that we are engaged with Advantage Group in a really great way. We meaning the CMA and CIMA. We have exciting things planned going forward with this great organization, and one of the things that we are going to be announcing is we're going to be giving out awards at our annual conference in February on best-in-class category development and shopper insights. And it's going to be at our conference based on the research that you will see here today. This is very valuable information if you haven't seen it before, and very exciting for us to be giving awards out based on the research. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Marc, and welcome, Marc.
Thank you, Leslie. Thank you, CIMA, thank you, CMA, and everyone. Welcome to today's session. My name is Marc Hubbard, and as Leslie so kindly introduced, I run the US business for a global company called Advantage Group International, and the US business is called Advantage Report USA. Despite this English accent, I actually am an American. I was born in Cleveland, Ohio, so go Browns. But my parents are English, and I left as a small child and grew up in the UK, hence my English accent. Having said that, I've actually lived in America longer than any other country in the world. I've been here for many, many years now. I got my MBA in the Chicago area, and this is where I reside with my wife and family. I am thrilled to be able to share with you today a little bit about what's driving retailer and supplier relationships. But for some of you that don't know Advantage Group International, I want to give you a little bit of context. So we've been in business for more than 30 years. We actually have no relationship to another company with a similar name to ours. And each year we do retailer and supplier collaboration studies in more than 40 countries around the world with 35,000 unique participants. Again, all business professionals, everything is B2B. Our US program, which is what we're going to look at today, has more than 3,000 US retailers and CPG partners giving feedback each year. We conduct over 1,000 interviews in the US alone to understand those drivers of performance and why your trading partner evaluated you as they did. All of the goal of helping you have the very best business relationship possible. And so why does engagement matter? Well, what's at stake? We've seen through our research around the world that CPG companies have about a 5% delta in sales between those rated as the highest collaborators in our research and those rated in the lowest. Think about your business. If you could get 5% more sales growth today, what would that mean to you? Not only is it hundreds of millions of dollars, it may double or even triple your current growth rates. And we see similar impacts on retailers' results as well. Those most highly collaborative retailers have the best business results. Look, we all live in a very dynamic, very complex, unfortunately, changing world every day, right? If we don't collaborate to understand how we're perceived both in our organization as well with our trading partners, we simply won't be successful. We may not even survive in the future. I want to quickly go through some methodologies to give you some context. Respondents, whether it's a retailer or a supplier, are simply rating their partners on a 5-point scale from one of the best to one of the worst. We then convert those ratings into points, and your points determine your rank. What we also want to look at is what are the drivers of performance. So while we may ask a lot of questions, not every question is honestly worth the same in the real world. And so we have a technology called overall performance significance, which uses a regression model. All you need to know is we basically do a statistical model that says, based on all the questions we ask, which questions are a predictor of an individual question's driver of overall performance. What matters most? If you ask 20 questions, not all 20 questions are worth the same. So we look for those high performance drivers through all that 3,000 plus voices, rating dozens and dozens of companies, literally millions of data points. And what we've done is boiled that down today into looking at what are the key drivers of performance for suppliers based on retailer feedback, real retailers in the US, and then what are those key drivers of performance for those big CPGs. So without further ado, let's look at what actually drives supplier performance as assessed by you, the retailers out there, the large grocers, mass, club, value, etc., etc. So because of our huge sample size, we actually split the feedback between different cuts. Today we'll just look at two, what we call core food or large food companies, those big multi-billion-dollar food organizations. And on the right-hand side, what are the key drivers for those large non-food companies, those multi-billion-dollar non-food organizations? Well, if we look on the left for a moment, we can see the number one driver of predictor of performance for a food supplier is building trust. If you may remember, building trust was the number one driver last year as well. And we'll talk about trust in a minute because it's such a critical factor. You also see it's the number one driver of performance with non-food suppliers. Now on the food side, what we see is that the product launch process is very critical. We've probably all read in the press almost at nauseum the last couple of years, right, about how many new companies saying, hey, I've got new products launching, I've got new products, my innovation plan isn't that successful. Well, that in itself isn't very differentiating. And more importantly, from a retailer point of view, is how are you launching that product? Just having something new is interesting. But companies that are seen as doing very well in the eyes of retailers, companies that really master the actual launch process. Now, the third key element for a food company is communication. It seems so fundamental and basic, but you'd be surprised how many companies are failing in the communication effort. They're simply not communicating regularly, they're unclear in their communication, they're certainly not proactive in many cases, and those are some key differentiators that are going to help you stand out from the crowd. And ultimately, retail sales that they look for from their partners, whether you are the very largest CPG in the world or some smaller startup. So how do you know if you're any good at any of these measures? How are you measuring your competencies? Are you asking yourself, how am I doing? Maybe your retailer says, hey, things are fine on communication. Or is fine really good enough? Through our 30 years of experience around the world, we can tell you that fine is rarely good enough, and fine will actually often have you ranked last amongst your peers. Fine means you're not winning the hearts and minds of your trading partners, and you're missing critical opportunities to grow your business. Maybe you don't even know they're available because you're not even invited to the table, and other suppliers are winning on those competencies. So I ask you to not just miss these fairly foundational competencies, but really understand, are you winning? And how are you measuring, are you winning? And do you know if you're getting the unvarnished feedback from your trading partner? Now, for your non-food suppliers in the audience, again, trust is important. Proactiveness. It's not just communication, it's proactive. How are you separating yourself from the crowd? Are you responding in a timely manner? That's great. That's good communication. That's responsiveness. But proactivity is particularly critical. And I can tell you some of those leading companies year over year in the non-food space, they really drive to be proactive, to constantly bringing new ideas and communication to their trading partners. And then retailers told us for those large non-food partners, actually managing promotions is the third most important competency. As I mentioned earlier, the drivers do change by category. The drivers even change by retailer. So depending on whom you're talking to, based on the function, based on the retailer, the channel, or the category you represent, those drivers do change. As a partner of ours, we actually have all that information prepared for you. But at a minimum, based on our research, I know that these competencies up here are very, very important. If you can really demonstrate excellence in those areas, you have a good chance of standing out from the crowd and not only winning the hearts and minds of your trading partner, but more importantly, growing your business faster than your competitors. Let's take a moment and look at trust, because it is absolutely foundational to both suppliers, as we saw on food and non-food. And in fact, I'll give the story away. It's also really, really important to suppliers when they evaluate retailers. Trust is built on a foundation of effective communication. There is obviously something said about trust being built on just time, right? Do I know you for a long period of time? Do I understand you as an individual, or have you just come into my life recently? But these are key drivers based on years worth of research that we've identified that really make a difference to building trust and building that cooperation and better business success. Again, all these slides are available to you, and you'll notice a hyperlink in the left-hand corner. There is a whole white paper report just on how to build trust. For sake of time today, I'm not going to spend the 30 minutes just on the trust capability. You've seen the competencies now. Let's also take a look at actually why trust matters. What do retailers tell us in their own words about their most trusted partners? I'll let you read these quotes for yourselves. So I ask you, are you and all your colleagues at every retailer you're delivering to, are you delivering a fact-based approach? Are you showing your impartiality? Are you bringing insights? Those are some of the components about great communication that build trust, that ultimately make your brand succeed in the eyes of your retail partners. Now, we've looked so far at what bricks and mortar retail are telling us, but through our research, we also have feedback from many either e-commerce teams at bricks and mortar retailers, or for that matter, pure play retailers such as peapod.com, box.com, or Fresh Direct. And they have different drivers of performance, what they're looking for from suppliers. The number one thing e-commerce retailers or e-commerce teams tell us they want from their supplier partners is driving category growth. Makes sense, right? E-commerce is a fast growing triple digit category sometimes. And so they're looking for partners that are demonstrating how you're driving the category growth. Because let's say selfishly, right, no retailer cares about you and your individual product. They really care about the category, and those that are bringing that category approach, demonstrating that leadership, are winning the hearts and mind of their retailer partners. Also, are you executing on agreed upon plans? Again, it sounds so fundamental, but you'd be amazed at how many companies really struggle at that. You and I have a one-to-one relationship. We may agree something, but if the company can't deliver on that, it damages your credibility. You're not driving category growth. And to be honest, every other supplier in the world is also banging on that e-com retailer's door, saying what they can do for them. If you can't execute and demonstrate that day in, day out, the retailer have a big incentive to go to somebody else. And then thirdly, we see meaning the retailer's supply chain metrics are absolutely critical. Again, that wonderful marketing plan you and I develop is pointless if we can't meet the retailer supply chain metrics, and that means their metrics, not your metrics, but whatever the retailer defines as success. Again, e-commerce can be a very expensive, very time-consuming, very complex medium to work within. And so having strong supply chain capabilities are absolutely critical. Now, you may say, look, I'm in category management, it's not my area, or I'm in shopper insights, it's not even my area. Again, understand the implications for your business, that man plan, those shopper insights. If your team can't execute on that to demonstrate how you're driving growth and deliver that with excellence, there was no point in even showing up in the first place. So how you as a business understand holistically how you show up, driving against these key competencies, give you every chance to win in the eyes of your retail partner. So what are the 10 key competencies that we've seen over the years help driving growth, meeting the retailer's category objectives? Well, again, these are the 10 competencies. I'll let you read them for yourselves for a moment. Now, for you retailers in the audience, remember that driving category growth is just as important to the suppliers. We've all seen zero-based budgeting models, and I personally believe that the dominance of those will certainly soften over the next few years, and Wall Street is turning its attention back to top-line performance. That's my personal opinion more than anything else. So as much as it is important for a retailer to engage their suppliers in driving category growth, as we've seen, it's equally important for suppliers. When both sides are talking about growth, more than talking about cost cutting, wonderful things can happen. And honestly, ask yourself as a retailer, do we make more money selling one more case of product or getting 5 cents off a case? I think you'll find you actually make your money by selling things. And also you'll find that you're motivating your supplier base much more when you're talking about growth than you are talking about productivity gains and how do we save a little bit of money here and there. So growth is also a wonderful engagement tool, not only because it is what retailers are looking for, but just emotionally, right? It's much more fun to talk about the positive that wins the growth than it is talking about how do we cut and cost save. So rather than hear from me, let me show you in the words of retailers what they talk about best-in-class suppliers for driving category growth and why it matters. I'd like to give a bit of coaching to retailers here. Please, please, please listen to me very carefully. Stop asking your vendor partners for more money. It is the wrong conversation. It's the wrong approach. It's not going to work. And quite simply, you're going to lose the battle. Now, you may get a few more bucks here and there, but so what? In the scheme of things, that isn't going to offset the growth potential. Are you talking about how you can mutually build profitable growth for both your business and for your suppliers? If not, I can tell you, you're not exciting your sales rep, who's not exciting their colleagues at HQ, and the finance team at HQ who are really deciding where those dollars and cents go are not going to send them to your business. You need to demonstrate a clear ROI about how you're driving the category growth and that supplier's growth. And when you do that, you really can get much more incremental and significant gain. So we spent a few minutes looking at what are the key drivers for suppliers based on real retailer feedback in 2019. Let's switch the story now and take a look at what the supplier community, those large and medium and even small size CPGs, think about retailers and what they're looking for. Now, this sample size is almost 200 unique companies and more than 1,400 unique professionals at those big CPG companies. So the sample size is massive. And what are they saying they want from their retail trading partners? Well, for major retailers, what suppliers are telling us is builds trust. Remember we just talked about a few slides ago, right? The number one driver of performance for a supplier with a retailer is builds trust. Well, guess what? It's exactly the same thing that you're asking for from your retailers. So the question you should be asking yourselves, am I building trust with my partner? And do both of us trust each other equally? If there's any gaps in that trust, any difference, there's a real opportunity to close that gap so you can be the best business possible. Now again, executing agreed upon plans happens to be equally tied with trust when we do our mathematical models. It may seem obvious, but don't discount it. It is absolutely fundamental, and it's a place that many retailers fall down on a regular basis. Doing what you say you're going to do while demonstrating the ROI for you and your suppliers will have them banging on your door and offering you more than your fair share of your market size. And I can tell you the number one retailer in America for 6 years in a row based on supplier feedback is Meijer. You may have heard me talk with Meijer before. They're a fantastic retailer who does a great job. And they understand that building trust, doing what they say they're going to do, are some of their key foundations to their success. But it's not easy to emulate. In fact, retailers that do not excel in these competencies are actually losing investment dollars and people resources every day. Now, the problem for a retailer is you may not even know you're losing that because you don't even know that is a potential for your business. But it is one of the reasons why your competitors may be outperforming you. And if you are a retailer out there and you're not the fastest growing or perhaps the largest 2 or 3, you simply can't dictate to suppliers what you want. You need to win on these areas to demonstrate you are the most attractive retailer in the world to partner with. And as I said, gain more than your fair share. Winning on these competencies is going to help you stand out in a very crowded space. Because honestly, as much as suppliers need you, you do need them. Now, we have retailer partners that are striving to not only be the number one to stay there, but want to get up to that top level because they understand the long-term business benefits to their organization when they're standing out and differentiating themselves from the crowd. And retailers, please talk about these competencies to your suppliers. Whether you partner with us or not is kind of irrelevant. Our research tells you what you need to do, and you know yourselves really how good you are. Ask your partners, how are we doing, stacking up? It can be a difficult conversation to have. Suppliers give you the unvarnished feedback, but if you're not having these conversations, you're missing opportunities to strengthen relationships and move the business forward faster. So again, don't listen to me. We've looked at trust already, talked about execution. Let's look at category management approach, and let's hear from suppliers' own voices why it matters. So retailers, ask yourself, are you emulating these competencies every day? Are we making sense of the e-commerce business? Have you even integrated your e-commerce business with your stores team? I can't tell you the number of retailers and CPGs I talk to every year and every day that don't have integrated teams, and yet world-class companies are doing that. They are linking the store and the online together to make a seamless shopper experience, because the shopper doesn't think about that way, right? They think about you as an entity and how can you meet their needs. And they expect seamless marketing, advertising, promotional capabilities, and ultimately delivery. Now I've got a real story for you to kind of explain this situation, why it's important. I was talking to a very large food CPG recently about their experience with a particular buyer. Now that supplier and buyer had very different objectives. Each side were dissatisfied with sales, however, and sales were suffering. The category at the retailer was underperforming versus other retailers. Now the retailer's perspective was, why don't we just ask for more money and do the traditional kind of procurement approach? Honestly, it wasn't working for them, and the suppliers had no interest in leaning in and engaging. A new buyer came in. We all know retailers like to move desks every now and again. A new person came in that more epitomized the company philosophy of collaboration and mutual benefit. And they asked suppliers, how can we grow the business together? What are we doing wrong? Suppliers came with suggestions. Within a few months, that category was now growing at double digits. It's now over-indexing for that retailer. Why? Because of how the buyer approached the suppliers in a collaborative approach to find a mutual win-win that everyone benefited from. Let's talk a little bit now about e-commerce retailers. For you that are either on the e-com team of a bricks and mortar retailer, or if you're a pure play retailer out there, what are your suppliers' expectations of you? Well, they are different naturally. One of the biggest expectations, or the biggest expectation, is your online shopper experience. That's how you shop every day. You take pride in your store every single day. You should absolutely take pride in your online experience. In fact, in some ways more so, because so much shopping is now online influenced. Even if they're not walking into your store, they're looking at you online. And that is absolutely critical, and many retailers are failing in that space. Honestly, many of the pure play retailers have better solutions right now, but they don't need to be. Having an integrated e-commerce strategy with stores is the second most important thing for suppliers this year. Makes absolute sense, right? Again, as I said, the shopper doesn't care where they buy from, or even in many cases who they buy from. They want an integrated experience, and as a brand, we're looking for a place that we can do linked marketing campaigns, because more than 50% of most grocery sales are now in some way online influenced. And then the third most important competency is you as a retailer investing in an up-to-date supply chain infrastructure. We talked about supply chain on the retailer side too, right? It's also equally important here. We know there are legacy issues coming from a bricks and mortar retailer versus a pure play, but it is absolutely mission critical for business success, for financial success, to do that. And in fact, world-class companies are looking to integrate all businesses together. Now, maybe CMA will have me come back another time. We'll talk about just advertising and how important having an integrated advertising strategy is, because I think that is really the new battleground for dollars and cents. E-commerce is an expensive channel for both retailers and suppliers, and anything both sides can do to improve supply chain is going to have a win-win on the net bottom line and allow you to grow even faster. So what does top performance look like for you, Mr. or Mrs. Retailer? Well, again, here is what suppliers tell us about their best partners. So ask yourself, are you doing these things every day? Are you demonstrating these competencies? And if you think you are you communicating that enough? You may know it, but does your trading partner know it? Because when they do, they're more likely to lean in. So what are some of the key takeaways from today's session? Well, ask yourself, print this out, take it home with you. For suppliers, print it out. Ask yourself, how are we building trust? Are we communicating clearly, proactively, always? Are we leading conversations with how we're driving category growth? And as a supplier, are we talking to a retailer about our desire to be their very best partner? If not, I guarantee one of your competitors are. Now, if you're a retailer, again, please print this out. Challenge yourself. Ask your peers and colleagues across your functions. How are we building trust with our vendor partners? How are we delivering on our commitments always, not just once, or me personally? But if my marketing team or my supply chain team are letting me down, then my whole business is being impacted. Is digital part of every single conversation? Whether I'm on the store side or the e-commerce side is irrelevant. It should be, because shoppers don't think of you as siloed businesses. And lastly, are we talking to our suppliers about our desire to be the best partner? Because I can tell you the best retailers in America are doing that, either directly, consciously, or unconsciously by how they behave every day. And those are the retailers that are getting more than their fair share of investment from suppliers. So those are the slides I wanted to share today. I would now like to open it up to the audience with any questions they might have for me.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark. That was very thought-provoking and interesting. And, we all feel like there are key elements and trust is important, but having the data to support and give us direction on how we should be formulating our teams and running our business is extremely valuable. So thank you for that. We do have a couple questions coming in here. Wait one second. Can you talk about the methodology again? Were retailers interviewed about their suppliers and vice versa, or retailers were interviewed about themselves?
So we do 360-degree feedback. We both do qualitative surveys, which we send a survey to a retailer. Please rate your key suppliers on 20 plus competencies on a 5-point scale. And then we do telephone interviews with those retailers, asking them, why did you rate company X as you did? What does best in class look like for you? We do the same thing on the supplier side. Mr. Supplier, rate your key retailers. We then do follow-up phone interviews. Why did you rate retailer X as you did? What does best in class look like? And we've been doing that for 30 years around the world, and that is how we come up to these best in class behaviors today.
Wow, thank you. Thank you. One other question. Do these drivers change over time? The drivers that you spoke about, do those change over time?
They absolutely do. Now, I will say that for the last 2 years, Builds Trust has been the #1 driver, not only in the US, but globally around the world. So trust doesn't seem to be going away anywhere soon, but absolutely we do see over the long term, 3-5 year time horizons, drivers change. And perhaps more importantly for you to understand is, while these are drivers at, we'll call it the total US level, if you're talking to Maya or Harris Teeter, their drivers are different. Oh, and if you're talking to a retailer's beer, wine, spirit team, their drivers are different from the private labels team, whose drivers are different from the, say, large food or frozen food team. So depending on who you talk to, the drivers are different. And through our rich sample size, as a partner of ours, we can actually tell you the drivers by category, by retailer. But fundamentally, the ones you've shared today are the most important at a macro level, and those I suggest you focus on.
Awesome, thank you. Where can I find information about the drivers for my category?
So the best thing is to call me. My contact details at the end of here, or Leslie knows how to reach me, and we
Yes.
can discuss what we have for your particular category. I can tell you there is also a report we're producing, hopefully later this month, certainly before Thanksgiving, on some of the key drivers of performance by category. So we're going to provide a free analysis for everyone that you'll be able to see both. I think CMA will be promoting, you'll find it on the Advantage website. So look for that to give you some more insights on some of the large categories, but not all of them.
Oh, that's awesome. That's great. One other question. As a retailer, how do I see what my company's drivers are?
Call me. Quite simply, if you've been a partner of ours, we have all the data set. It may have gone to your chief merchant and may not have filtered down to your organization. If you reach out to me right now, I'm more than happy to work you through how you rated your suppliers, what your key drivers are, and help you understand if the message you think your people are giving your suppliers are really how they're assessing the suppliers. And I can tell you, it can be some interesting conversations with the retailers.
That's awesome. Thank you. Well, those are the questions that we have for today. So I want to thank you, Mark, for this webinar. Very, very interesting. Some really good stuff. And remember, everyone, to watch for our newsletter for upcoming webinars. And again, Marc's contact information is here on the screen. And you can also reach out to myself, Leslie Warshaw, and those of us at the CMA and SEMA as well. So thanks everyone for today, and have a great weekend.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Take care.